Hello, welcome to Macroeconomics, McConnell, Brew, and Flynn. We're in Chapter 2, Market System and Circular Flow. So, piggybacking off of Chapter 1, we're going to pick this up, continue to move on, and as we did in the last chapter, I will be going through the slides, obviously, and trying to keep track in the textbook for those who are taking classes and wish to kind of follow along that way. Okay, make sure you have your favorite caffeinated beverage in front of you. I have a little tea or coffee depending on the day to keep me awake and keep me going. Long day. However, we're going to have fun. All right, let's get started. This chapter is a brief comparison between the command and laissez-faire system. Then we're going to transition to a discussion of the characteristics of the market system. Talk about the 5 fundamental questions every economist must face, a little bit about Adam Smith and the invisible hand, and some explanations about the command system. Then we'll talk about the circular flow model involving an overview of resources and goods that move through the system. And the chapter will discuss the market system, how it deals with risk. The last word will look at the vast number of ways resources can be arranged and why that doesn't result in a bit of randomness. There is an order to it. All right, we are on page 26 of the textbook. Our contest, which we discussed already. And let's get into market systems. When we're talking about market systems, we're talking about how resources are allocated. Generally, they're allocated through some mechanism, some institution. The two extremes are a decentralized system where the market is organized by basic supply and demand. We'll get to in another time. Or we can go to the other extreme where it is a centralized system where the government controls how resources are allocated. We'll get into a little better definition of that in a moment. As economists, we tend to prefer to look at the system as a laissez-faire capitalism. That means no government interference, or at least a minimum of it. You need the government to protect property rights, to enforce laws, and that's about it. Property rights, we're referring to if you own it, you get to keep it, no one can take it from you. That is a bad thing. And any other legal rights that may fall into play, if you wish to sue someone or take them to court, that is the role of the government to make sure that you have a fair and honest attempt at binding contracts, trials, and things of that nature. On the other extreme, we have what is known as a command system. And we were talking about that. On the extreme, the central government tells people what to do. On the lighter end of that is socialism. Communism is on the extreme on that side. The example that always comes up is North Korea, Cuba, and Myanmar tend to fall in there, but possibly the best known system of extreme communism is still North Korea. This is also called a closed system. Not a lot of interaction, and everything is already put in place. No market forces allowed. In a market or an open system, it's generally more of a mix. There is some decentralization. The government does make certain rules depending on where you're at. The utilities are probably controlled by a government entity, water, electricity. In most parts of the world, it is a mixed system, one favoring one side or the other, working with private markets for resources and other things. Under the assumption, as we talked about in the last chapter, everyone's looking after their best interests and their best behaviors. Next, we'll talk about some characteristics of the marketplace. And we have already kind of covered that first point, laissez-faire, command, and market systems. What are some of the characteristics of a market system? How do you know you are in one? trying to understand why things work the way they do. Generally, you have private property. You go out and buy a guitar, a piano, it is yours. You can choose what you wish to buy, what brand of cell phone, how many features you want with a cell phone. That is a market economy. You're looking at this as your best interest. Competition and market prices will also dictate what you have. There's an ever-changing technology. There's specialization, which is one of the reasons why people get a college degree, in order to get a skill set that the general public does not have. We generally use money. Bartering we'll discuss a little later. It is a difficult and complex system to achieve. And we hopefully have limited government involvement. And we are all the way on page 29. It's a simple graph of what they consider freedom, how much liberty, how much free market enterprise is available, meaning a little government involvement and people can choose what they wish to do. Again, at the bottom, we see the most repressive regime is, by most economic measures, would be North Korea. One of the things that actually create a lot of change is technology. If there's any change in the system, 40% of it is usually due to technology. It creates all type of specializations and skills and resources that weren't available before. If you're an accounting major, what is your favorite software? Your favorite software is Excel, because you can put numbers in there and automatically do the calculations. If you're talking about doing accounting, how long would it take you to do that type of work by hand? Pen and a sheet of paper, compared to you setting up cells in an Excel spreadsheet, just plugging the numbers in there and automatically having the calculations done. Because of the advance in technology, you can specialize in this particular field, earn a good living, and now you have a division of labor. Money. Why do we use money? Because a lot of students have often said, hey, it's because it buys stuff. Well, why does it buy stuff? We all agree it has value. That's it. As long as we all agree it has some form of value, it is considered stored value. And without that, without money, we'd have to resort to bartering. This is what bartering looks like. Now replace the 3 states with 3 people. One person has a cell phone, one person has a guitar, one person has a camera. Let's say they're all worth about the same. Now, if you want, and we'll go back to the food that is used in here, you want to go grocery shopping. Your local grocery store probably isn't going to take payment of a cell phone for you buying milk, eggs, and flour. And as you see, these 3 states want to interchange with each other. But if you're in Nebraska and you have excess wheat and you want potatoes, and someone in Idaho doesn't want potatoes, you have a problem. So now you have to enter a third party, and now you have to exchange the wheat for oranges. Well, Idaho wants oranges, and now you see the problem. Everyone has to find someone who's willing to exchange their goods and services for something the second party wants. So now I need a third party to be involved in this. It becomes a mess. Well, the purpose of money is, here, let me give you something of equivalent value. I'll get the potatoes, and you can do whatever you want with the money. So the real reason we have money is simply to avoid what is known as a coincidence of needs, which rarely ever happens. Rarely are you going to find someone with equal value to what you want willing to exchange something that you have. This is why we use money. And our basic premise is the government should not get involved. The free market will dictate where resources should go. And by that, what I mean is, I'll be using this analogy a lot. You run an electronics firm. Let's say their firm is called Orange. You make cell phones, you make tablets, watches, laptops, desktops, all types of electronic devices. How much of which device are you going to make? You have limited resources, limited time. The factory is only so big. What are you going to make? Well, the market will dictate which one you should spend more time on. You're probably going to sell more cell phones than anything else, so the majority of your time and resources will be spent manufacturing that. This is why we refer to the market telling the suppliers what to make. You don't need the government saying divide it up evenly. There would be a shortage. When we're talking about the marketplace, you have to answer these 5 questions. What do you want to produce? The market will tell you what to do. How do you plan to produce the goods? Meaning, what are the resources involved? And where are you going to get the resources? Who are you selling to? Who are your clients? Will you be able to accommodate any change? And we'll kind of combine that with any increase or progression of technology. Change, basically. What are you going to make? How are you going to make it? Who are you going to sell to? And will you be ready for change? If you're not ready for change, those are called bankrupt companies that no longer exist. Walmart was ready for change. Kmart, for whatever reason, was not. Let's get into a little detail on these. What are you going to make? The market will tell you which one to make. Again, back to our analogy of the 5 or 6 devices, which one are you going to make? Most of the time, you're going to make a cell phone. Are you going to increase the production of one or the others somewhere, depending on the time of year, the seasons, and things of that nature? You may make more laptops in, say, July and August, because that's back to school time, and students will need new devices. So you might take a little bit less time with one area and back to another. Then you might go back to the phones, and then, okay, we're getting back to the holiday period and the end of the year. Maybe you want to put more time in the tablets, maybe desktops. They're higher margin goods, and maybe that's where you feel, hey, I'll start to use those, and hopefully we can sell a few more of those. What will be produced? The marketplace will indicate what you should be making. How are you going to make it? Will this be handcrafted or will it be automated? Do you have access to the resources? Can you get the chips? Can you get the plastic, the monitors, the screens, anything you need? That has to be taken into account. After the global pandemic of COVID-19, the idea of the supply chain issue is extremely important. Can you get the raw materials you need, and possibly the labor as well, in order to make something? This graph talks about, again, those 4 factors as far as production for a bar of soap. Where are you going to get the materials? How much is it going to cost? Between our, again, labor, people making it, land would be the natural resources to make soap, the capital, money that you have to build the factory, and do you have someone with entrepreneurial spirit in order to actually make this happen? You can see that one's about the same. The capital changes, the land use changes, and then you have the cost of labor, depending on which one you're using. Slightly different. Who are you selling to? It's going to depend on age, taste, education, and finally income. There are a number of other things, but those are generally some of the things that are the main issues as to who gets what. If you're going to make an expensive cell phone, you may not sell as many, and you need to find the market for it. How will this system adapt? If you go back 10, 15 years as far as cell phone technology, again, I'm old enough to remember when the cell phone did nothing but call people. It was considered what, a flip phone? Don't see as many. They come back in and out of style. But that was the only thing you could do with it. You could make calls. Will you be ready to make the change as technology advances? Do you have the capabilities to actually make changes in your production and with the labor and everything else also involved to go along with the times? You run the risk of what is known as creative destruction. Those of you who don't remember, hopefully you do remember, there was a lovely company in the United States called Blockbuster. They would rent out VHS tapes, big tapes, movies on them. Then they went to disc. Well, creative destruction would be Netflix putting Blockbuster out of business. And if you want to go look that up, I'm sure there are a couple of YouTube channels that explain, hey, Blockbuster tried to sell itself to Netflix. Netflix said, that will never work. Famous last words. Then we move on to what is politely known as who is known as the father of modern economic theory, Mr. Adam Smith. This is one of those people that you should leave the class and just put into a category. If you're ever in some discussion and you want to quote someone famous in the field of economics, Adam Smith is probably the name you want to use. In short, the market is moving by invisible forces. You don't necessarily plan ahead of time, but the market will change and adapt to you. Again, it's probably easier with a couple of videos to make the explanation, but if you were trying to make a toaster, how complicated would it be for you to make a toaster? And when I mean make a toaster, I do not mean get the parts and piece it together. I mean, how hard would it be for you to make the plastic, the circuit board, the thin metal frame that the bread goes in? How hard would it be for you to make all those components from scratch? Well, you don't have to. If you wanted to make a toaster, you could probably buy the parts and piece something together on your own. But someone has to make the components before then. They're just making them in general, and you want a specific part, and they will customize it for you. That is what it refers to as the invisible hand. We're all trying to get something done, but it's a very complex system between all parties actually taking care of each other's needs. Before, we talked about the command system, which is where the government tells everyone what to make and how to make it in those 5 questions. The problem with it is very simple. If you're wrong, you don't have resources allocated in the appropriate area. The government comes in and says, everyone is going to wear a fitness watch. We're not going to make cell phones for 3 months. Probably not a good use of resources. The other issue is, if I'm being told what to make, that entrepreneurial ability we discussed is out the window. If there's no gain for me, why am I going to discuss how to alleviate any problems due to a surplus in one area and a shortage in another? Even if I do, and I'm not going to get anything from it and no one's going to take my advice, why bother? So, a total command system generally does not work. That being said, a pure open market system without any involvement of the government to actually make sure that it works evenly and to prevent monopolies probably isn't going to work too well over a long period of time either. We'll talk a little bit about the circular flow. We're only going to talk about two large entities, households and businesses. Again, the consumer and the supplier, the production market and the research market, and we're going to put it into a quick graph and walk through it. Here's our lovely graph. And we are on slide 23. And just to catch up, we're all the way on page 37. What you're looking at in the blue boxes are our entities, supplies, and demand. We'll get to that in the next chapter or so. But we have businesses and households. And if you will notice, they are both looking for some resources, and they are both looking for income. In the resource market, businesses are going out, and we're talking about at 12 o'clock, the red box at the top. Households are selling their resources. That would be land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability as the red line goes counterclockwise into it, and the businesses hire people. What do they get in exchange? They get money, wages, profits, things like that. As we move down to 6 o'clock, the other red box, the product market. You have the money in the household. You take that money that you earned from the business and you go buy products. An example of that might be you work at Walmart. But again, you need milk, eggs, flour. So where are you going to buy it? Back at Walmart. And it becomes a closed circuit if you're looking at it in that light, and it simply loops back around. You are paid, you spend the money. The money is earned by the company, they hire people, and it simply flows back and forth, and you see an exchange of goods and services for other resources, which might happen to be money. So if you're wondering how the whole system works, this is a good idea and a simple analogy. Businesses face risk because they have to allocate resources quite effectively, labor shortages. People could change their taste. You probably, if nothing else, eat a different diet as you get older than when you were younger. You could probably live on cereal, on sweets and other things. As you get a little older, you don't quite do that. Most people don't. They change a little bit as they get older. For the employees, you're making sure that you have a secure place to work. Again, everyone faces some risk. The business owners have to deal with how do they keep and retain quality people. Trying to hire and train people who have from businesses that have a high turnover is a pain. It is a loss of time and other valuable resources. So the idea is to actually keep and retain quality people, and no one wants to keep changing careers, trying to find a good, stable company where you can work at and hopefully grow. Both sides have to deal with the risk and have to figure out ways to deal with it. Okay, moving on to the last slide, slide 26, Hasta la vista to Venezuela. There are a couple of good videos on YouTube. If you put in Venezuela and economics, there are some good videos that discuss what happened, how it went horribly wrong for a country that had one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Not going to get into this here, but it's interesting just to, from an economic standpoint, to spend a little time, find a quick video of maybe 10-15 minutes and look into it. All right. That should cover chapter 2. We'll move on to chapter 3 soon enough. You have a good day. Again, this does not take the place of you reading the chapter, doing homework, or things of that nature. This is meant to be a supplement. All right, then. I will see you in the next one. You have a good day.